Yeah, so that's that. So you're ultimately going to try and write something. You're going to get something to look like y equals ax minus h squared plus k. That's the goal, right? Because it's asking you to write it in vertex form, which it tells you there, right? Like that's what that is, right? So I guess in order to answer part A, we're going to have to look at the information that they've given us up here, right? In this.
Yeah.
Right. So, and these can be tricky. But again, we're talking about a rectangular prism, right? And then it says something else here about the base of a rectangular prism is 2 meters greater than the width. And it tells you that the height is 15 meters. So there's not a lot, like...
No.
This one might be a bit tricky, but... Actually, maybe not, because you've got a constant in here, right? So, I see. Well, we could draw a picture, right? And we could draw a rectangular prism.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a very good prism, but it's okay. Right. Okay, something like that. Right, so once you get this, now you're going to say, okay, well, now you can, that's why pictures are useful, right? So I can say, okay, well, the base, so the bottom here, is 2 meters greater than the width, right? So we could almost say, okay, obviously we're going to have kind of a length of a prism, right?
Yeah.
So this here, the length is equal to the width plus 2, right? Because it's saying that the base of the rectangular prism is 2 meters greater than the width.
Mm-hmm.
So it's width plus 2. And then obviously this one here is just the width, right? And then it told me that the height was 15.
Yeah.
Right? So I actually haven't done one of these questions before. This is a new one for me. But there is something common going here, right? So
Sorry.
no worries.
All right. So. Width is equal to what? Just
The width is just the width, right? But they told you about the length.
Yeah.
So the length is 2 meters longer than the width. And then it told me the height was 15.
Yeah.
So there you go. Now you tell me what's the volume equal to of a rectangular prism?
Base times height. Wait.
Okay, sorry, close. It's what you're saying is it's the area of the base times the height. So what's the area of the base in this case?
The area.
So the area of the base, right?
Yeah.
Is going to be length times width, right?
Okay,
So that's the bottom section here. This piece here, right? Along the bottom. So you're going to have W times W plus 2. And then you're going to multiply that by the height.
Okay.
Or you could just think of it as length times width times height, right?
Yeah.
3 dimensions. multiply them together. That's how you get 3D objects, right?
Yeah.
So I know the length. So what's great about my diagram is I had, well, you did it too, is we had the foresight to see that I'm going to write the length as L equals W plus 2, right? So this isn't a lot different than the last question. Because remember, we had to isolate for one of the variables and plug it into the area, right? So it's not a lot different. This time here, I'm just going to say, well, if L is equal to this, then I'm just going to replace everything that's here, right? So it's W plus 2 multiplied by W, right? Multiplied by 15,
Okay.
right? So this is like, it's kind of like, you could use your table, the table to use to do expansion. All you're going to do here is just expand with 3 things, right? So why don't we do I'm going to do the W plus 2. I'm going to put the W into that,
Okay.
right? So if I multiply the W into the W plus 2, I'm going to get W squared plus 2W, right? And now I only have, there's that bracket, but I still have to multiply both those by 15.
Yeah.
Now, or do I? Because ultimately, remember what we got going on here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to write it in this form. So what am I going to have to do in order to do that?
Factor it or complete the square.
I'm going to have to complete the square, right? So if I multiply the 15 into there, I'm just going to have to factor it out again because the A value has to be 1. So why don't I just write it like this and then leave it W squared plus 2W, and now I just complete the square on this piece here, right?
Yeah.
Once I do that, I'm going to get something that looks like this. So my Z value in this question is going to be, it's 2 divided by 2 squared, right? So that's just 1. Right? And again, I always kind of forget this. I'm going to use square brackets just for simplicity's sake, right? And I know that the first 3 terms that are there are going to condense down into a perfect square trinomial, right? Because I'm going to need 2 numbers to multiply to 1, but add to 2. That's 1 and 1. So it's 15 square bracket W plus 1 squared minus 1, close the square bracket, and then just put the 15 in.
Okay.
Into both. Then you're done, basically, right? So you're going to get 15 right, there you go. That looks like something that I was asking for, like vertex form, right? I've got an A value, I've got an H value, and I've got a K value, right?
Yeah.
So the next question you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get it all down.
No worries. So you can always, like, these are a little bit tricky in the sense that, like, it's not necessarily the completing the square piece that, like, should be the challenge, right? Like, completing the square is completing the square always and always will be, right? And you always do it for the same purpose. It's to write things into vertex form, right? The challenge is obviously coming up with this.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, that's the major hindrance part around this particular section of quadratics, right? It's like the final stretch. Like, we've shown you everything that you need to know in order to do the questions. It's now, this is the thinking piece, right? You got to come up with the equations yourself and then do the work, right? In order to actually answer anything, right? So the next part of this question asks you if the volume is 2,145 meters cubed. write an equation to model the situation. Okay. So in this case, it's saying that like the volume's going to be y. So when I multiply these three things together, I'm going to get an answer. That's going to represent the volume, right? So y is on the, well, the volume's on the y-axis, right? So I'm basically going to say, okay, well, I'm going to take my equation, right? But this is just this written in a different way,
Yeah.
right? So technically we could say, okay, well, volume equals 15w plus 1 squared minus 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the question says, okay, well, what if the volume is equal to this? Write an expression. Okay, well, it's 2145, right? 21.
All right.
So you could kind of, I think maybe ultimately kind of what it wants, would it, I don't know if they want you to, you could bring it over. You could say, I don't know. I think that's maybe what they're looking for. We could check the answer after. You could bring this over and like do negative 15 minus this.
Mm-hmm.
That would equal 0. Because ultimately I'm gonna subtract 2145 from both sides. So it's gonna be 0 is equal to that. I don't know if that's what it wants or not. Maybe we should check the answer. Just to see what it's saying. Page is this again, sorry?
281, yeah.
Alright, 281. Alright, what number is that?
It was number 8. Wait.
Why do they not have that in there?
Number 18.
They like skipped it.
What?
They skipped it. That's good, eh?
Yeah, that's great.
There's no answer. Wonderful. Alright. Well, let's just run with the fact that this is right then. Because I think it is.
That's weird.
Solve the equation by factoring is what it wants you to do.
Oh, wait. It's because it's an achievement check.
There's no solution. Yeah, okay. Alright. So
No cheating.
No cheating on this question. Can't work backwards. So there, I think that's what it wants. Now it says solve this equation by factoring. What are the dimensions of the base and of the rectangular prism? Okay. Do you know what? So I don't think I would necessarily solve this by factoring. I think there's an easier way to do this. And I don't know if Ms. McCrae showed you this or not. All right, this would be the way. Like, I don't necessarily want to do it with factoring. Right, for the reason that, watch this. Ultimately, if I solve for W, if I just solve for W, it's going to tell me the width, obviously, and then I can also figure out what the length is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
If I know what W is, right? Well, I have an equation down here, right, that has W in it. So why don't I do 2145 plus 15 is equal to 15W plus 1 squared. This is question C, right? So 2145 plus 15 is going to be what?
Pardon?
So I tried to figure out
Yeah.
2145 plus 15 is 2160. And then 2160 divided by 15 should be something. I don't know what it is. We could check it. This is a much faster way than factoring. Right? I don't know, Ms. McCray.
I think so.
I don't know if like this is the way I would do this, right? Like, because it works out so nicely. So it turns out that 2160 divided by 15
Is 144.
is 144, right? And that's equal to W plus 1 squared.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just like anything else that you ever do, if, like, let's pretend that I'm going to divide, what I did here, I divided both sides by 15, right? That's because dividing is opposite of multiplying, right? So in this question down here, I've got a little squared sitting here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Right?
you have to square root both
If
sides.
I square root both sides,
Which is, I already know, 12.
it's 12. But here's the catch. Anytime you do this, you have to write plus minus.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Okay, good.
Plus minus.
So I get plus minus 12 is equal to W plus 1, right? So then I can subtract 1 from both sides. And I'm going to go, tricky. Oh, not really. You can go, okay, well.
You move 1.
Yeah, you can go. You can go negative 1 plus minus 12, right? So you're going to get negative 1 plus 12 is going to equal to 11. And you're going to go negative 1 minus 12 is equal to negative 13. Now, here's the problem. It doesn't make any sense to have a negative width,
No.
right? So you get to ignore that one,
Yeah.
right? So then in actuality, W is going to be equal to 11, right?
Yeah.
So you see how much faster that is than, like, would you know the process to, like, have to, I'd have to expand this, right? And then I'm going to have some, like, it's just not going to be pretty, right? It's a lot more work to factor this in order to find the width than it would be just to solve for the width directly, right? So there's my W equals 11. And then I can also solve for, now that I know W, right? Now that I know W, I can solve for L. Right? So L is going to be equal to, what is this, 2 plus W, right? So there's just 3 dimensions now. The height is 15, the length is 13, and the width is 11. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So wait. So height is 15. Length is width plus 2, because the width is 11.